In this paper, it looks at how Iota-Carrageenan inhibits viral replication of COVID. And this is actually the second study by these authors that showed this effect, where they first demonstrated that Iota-Carrageenan efficiently inhibited viral replication of the COVID original Wuhan type, in addition to alpha, beta, gamma, and delta, where in this paper they're expanding to BA1, BA2, and BA5, which are different Omicron subvariants. What they found is that Iota-Carrageenan exhibited similar antiviral activity against all analyzed Omicron subvariants, and the authors concluded that the physical barrier provided by Iota-Carrageenan might be applicable for prophylaxis and early treatment of SARS-CoV-2 infections. The Iota-Carrageenan concentrations were at 1.2 milligrams per milliliter, dissolved in an isotonic saline solution at 0.5%. For infection experiments, the cells were inoculated with COVID, one of the three strains, for a period of 1 hour, and then they were washed and further treated with interventions, namely contact with the Iota-Carrageenan. And then at 72 hours post-infection, the virus-containing cell culture supernatants were incubated for 10 minutes at 95 degrees Celsius. And finally, they ran a quantitative reverse transcriptase PCR analysis, which, as we know from prior literature, is a good way to detect live replicating virus. And as an aside, it's really interesting, they took these BA2, BA5, and BA1 subvariants of COVID directly from patients. So they cultured virus from patients and then used that for the experiment. An important thing to note from their study is that they're reporting in micrograms per milliliter of the Iota-Carrageenan concentrations, which are these ones over here. So essentially what they're doing is they're testing different dilutions of the 1.2 milligram per milliliter concentration. And so for reference, when we're testing at 1.2 milligram per milliliter, well, a milligram is 1,000 micrograms. So on this scale, while it's not shown, 1,200 would be the reported concentration for the similar thing on this scale. And as we see, as the Iota-Carrageenan concentration increases in micrograms per milliliter, meaning that as this number increases, there's more of the Iota-Carrageenan in the solution, we see that as the concentration increases, the inhibition of COVID also increases. So there's less actively infectious COVID with a higher concentration. And then also very interestingly, the HPMC, that hydroxypropylmethylcellulose, which sort of acts as a viscosity enhancer and helps to keep the drug in contact with the nose longer, as opposed to just falling straight out of the nose. We see that that has no inhibition qualities for COVID. In other words, that has no antiviral activity, which is just interesting and good to know. And in terms of live virus, so this would be 100% live virus, this would be 0% live virus. We see that after the 72 hours post-infection of the cell lines, that at 100 micrograms per milliliter, there's very high viral inhibition, meaning that it's preventing COVID from continuing to replicate for each of the three variants tested for BA1, for BA2, and for BA5. And then to throw this back into context, all you would need is a 0.1 milligram per milliliter concentration of Iota-Carrageenan in order to effectively inhibit viral replication. That's the concentration you would need in the nasal spray to have huge reductive effects, with the major thing being that, in summary, there are no differences in the antiviral effects of Iota-Carrageenan against the various COVID variants, which further supports the molecular mechanism by which carrageenans prevent virus entry by forming an extracellular physical barrier to both prevent fusion between the virus and the host cells, and to also catch, like a net, any virus that has replicated and then explodes back into the nose to try and infect the surrounding cells. So in essence, it's acting as a very effective net to catch all of these virus particles, which is ideal because what you would want is for a prophylactic or early therapeutic treatment to prevent infections or to prevent the progression of infections with COVID even before the virus reaches the target tissue like the lung epithelial cells. Essentially, if you catch it in the nose and prevent it from progressing further, then that's a very good thing. And finally, the Iota-Carrageenan entrapped viruses are removed spontaneously from the nose by mucillary clearance. So not only are they naturally caught, they're also naturally expelled from your nose, which results in a significant reduction in the viral load in the nasal cavity and hence a reduction in the duration of disease or even the development of disease itself, if this is done early enough.